welcome to another episode of Reluctant Hero Podcast. This podcast is for inspiration. I built it to inspire you through the stories of others because we all are on a hero's journey. We all have the inner hero inside, and we often find ourselves reluctant to fully show up as ourselves and to fully express ourselves in most creative ways. So, by combining this podcast and inviting guests on it, I have been attempting to inspire others by sharing these stories. And hopefully, you listeners can find some relatability and find a way to inspire yourself to express yourself fully. My name is Pauline. I am the peak performance and creative flow state coach. I have been doing this for quite some time. And my approach has always been to improve our life through knowing ourselves better and through expressing ourselves through creativity. And that is what I attempt to do with my business as well. And today on this episode, we have a guest, Zach from Breakbox Coaching and Creative. He is an executive coach. And as I usually do, I let guests introduce themselves. So, Zach, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Pauline, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, Breakbox Coaching and Creative started about 10 years ago through my own story of working through a laundry list of traumas and things that I had experienced in my own life that I had begun some therapeutic practice on. And it just kind of built as I had started a podcast that I don't no longer am doing right now, but I had started to get a bunch of people from that podcast and leaders from that podcast asking me for help of how I broke kind of out of that corporate PTSD that I experienced and corporate trauma that I experienced in corporate America. And I began talking people through it after going to 4 years of therapy myself and then creating a healing process of like how to heal those things. So essentially what we do at Breakbox Coaching and Creative is we guide leaders, individuals, and organizations to create healing and lasting cultures of flow, authenticity, and innovation. And although that sounds very markety and very like kitschy, the process of that is we get into the nitty gritty of the psyches and the things of our clients that are going on inside them, help them navigate and train them how to understand the difference between their true authentic self, their shadow, and their ego or their false self. And it's a fun and exciting and like you said, and a creative journey of navigating those things inside. But our goal is that they leave working with us, having the tools to do the work on their own. And how I came to that being the biggest problem is I myself had 4 to 5 years of therapy that really did a great job of navigating the roots of where my trauma came from and where the pain was going on in my life and how the programming was from that pain was affecting my life moving forward. But what therapy didn't do well was give me the tools on now what do I do with that? How do I heal that? How do I move forward in that? How do I make changes in my life so that these patterns don't keep reoccurring? And a lot of my clients come to me with the same thing. They've gone to therapy for 10 to 15 years and they just haven't had no results. They feel better after going to therapy. They talk to somebody about what's going on and they walk away feeling better, but then nothing's changing. And I noticed the same thing. And so I went on a deep dive of my own journey of like, okay, how do I find these? And that led me to a lot of psychology books, a lot of holistic books, a lot of energetic books, a lot everything, anything and everything that works, right? So I'm not against anything. I'm pro anything that works. And that's the creative part of what we get to do with clients is we don't have to judge what the tool is. We get to just experience it with them and they get to follow through and pick the ones that work for them. And that's how it works the best. Like we can throw our tools and ideas on other people, which I think a lot of coaches do, which isn't that helpful because if the tool doesn't fit the user, then it's not going to be able to really root out or create the new creation of what the client wants. So that's a whole lot really fast, but that's a lot what we do, and we do it with companies as well. We work with HR directors and companies. We're working with two companies right now, and very aware companies, right? They realize that their teams have been hurt or they're seeing a bunch of turnover or they're seeing problems that have surfaced because of bad leadership and they bring us in to help heal those processes.
I love that. this is just a whole bunch of stuff that I love, and I love talking about it, and I can talk about this for days. The flow state, the creativity, the shadow work, the all the aspects of therapy, and then performance-based coaching. Like, holy shit, I love it. Because what I've been focusing on myself is like how to use all the tools. There's so many tools out there, so much information about how to heal yourself, how to help others, all of that stuff. But how do you really integrate that in order to fully express yourself, in order to show up creatively? Because creativity is like that spirit coming through you,
Yeah.
expressing itself. But if there are all kinds of layers on top blocking that creative channel, then it doesn't matter how many tools you have, they're all going to be useless.
Yeah.
So it's like I love this approach to really look deeply within the person, give them the tools, but also let them understand how to use that. And that a similar thing I do with my own clients. It's a long process, touch and go. They kind of take time to figure out what really works for them. Because one of the things I found out is that no matter how much information is available, there's only certain things that will resonate with a person at certain time based on whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like for each of us, we only have the consciousness we have at the moment we have it. So that's the kind of narrative too, and the truth about the work that we do is the tools that they need and the tools that they adapt for themselves right now are for the consciousness they have in the moment. And as they grow and their consciousness grows because they continue to do the work, those tools stop working. And then the creative process begins again of like, what are my next tools?
Yeah, it's a constant reiteration. And the consciousness part is so important because there are different levels. They have been mapped out in a whole bunch of different books. We know the map, but map is not territory. Once you know the map and you know the tools, you have to actually go and test them out on
Yeah.
where you are. And yeah, it is true that sometimes certain tools stop working, but if that's the only thing you know, then that's the only thing you're going to be doing and continuously recycling that same thing that doesn't work. And
Yeah.
that becomes really frustrating at times because it seems like, well, I have all the tools. Why aren't they working?
Yeah, exactly. I've read the books. I've done, and we keep reading the books. And I think what I've navigated and realized with this in my own life, but as well in the life of clients, is is because I work with leaders and because I work with a lot of high performance people, they want change now, right? They're ready for it now, which I love because it makes them easier to work with. Like we can drop down into the deep places that they need much easier because of their desire to like actually do the work and do and make some changes. Um, but the flip side of that is we get into, you know, psychological consumerism or self-help consumerism or spiritual consumerism, where we're just buying books, assuming that reading these books or buying these books or having these books or this podcast or listening to that podcast or listening to this audiobook or, you know, talking to this person. We're doing all these things that are supposed to help, but the only thing that really helps is going inside yourself. And
Yeah.
what those books and podcasts and audiobooks can be, and I think they serve the best purpose, is kind of the same reason and way I will use AI. Like I'm not going to use AI to write my book, but I'm going to go back to AI every once in a while to get a little inspiration of like, hey, how would you say this? Or how would this be? Or what could this be? And then you can just grab it. When a big part of my life was, believe it or not, Pauline, I don't think you knew this about me, but I was actually a pastor in those big mega churches that you see on TV for
No
about
way.
17 years. They groomed me into it. I came into the church when I was 16 and being somebody who was charismatic, I guess halfway decent looking and well spoken. I'm not going to say I was targeted for this, but also with just kind of the giftings that I have, I was kind of groomed and raised in that world. And coming out of that world, I had a major event, kidney failure in my life when I was 29 that changed my life, that changed my viewpoint on life, that began to wake me up into the world. And during that process of kidney failure, I spent 2 years on dialysis. And I was like, I have 15 hours a week where I'm sitting on a machine to live. What am I going to do? So I started getting my master's degree in theology, learned to translate the Bible, the native languages of the Bible, Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, and then learn the proper hermeneutics of like pulling from the Bible from who was it written to at what time in history and how would they have interpreted it. That's how you get the truth. But then the language on top of it, and I reread the Bible 13 times in those 2 years of 15 hours a week of dialysis. And what that led me to was like the world and the life that I'm living is not the world that is actually in this book and was originally written for it. And we could argue about the Bible or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like everybody's got an idea of where it came from and the truth. But the point is, I did the work to navigate the truth of my consciousness at the time that awoke me to a new place that I then had to make a decision of, am I going to keep my life going here, or and knowing what I know now, or am I going to make a shift and a change to get into something different?
That is
And
so cool. I love it. That's such a left field, out of left field kind
I
of
know
thing,
you
unexpected.
wouldn't have known
So,
it with the mohawk and the tattoos that was the
no,
path.
right?
But
But I'm curious to know your perspective of what you said about the world isn't being different than what is written in the book. Can you tell us more about that?
yeah, the world that I came in, the religious world that I came in, was essentially, well, I'll say this quote. There's a man named Richard Halverson. He used to be the chaplain for the United States Senate. And he verbalized the transition and the move of Christianity from its origins to America in this way. And he said, when Christianity began, it began around men and women and families and communities building their lives around the love of Christ and the love of each other and serving one another. And then when that belief moved to Europe, it became an institution. And when it moved to America, it became an enterprise. And that's what I experienced. Like I experienced in the world that I was in, I'm not saying all churches are all things, but in the world that I was in, when I had reached the top after being there for 16 years and made my a way for myself and was traveling the world and speaking on big platforms with thousands of people and, you know, just salary, $250,000 a year, tax free, right? Because I'm a pastor. When I got to the top of that world, what I noticed was it all ran by money and ego. And it ran by protecting what's mine and doing whatever we have to do with the narrative to keep the people coming and keep the people paying. And whether it was conscious or unconscious, it doesn't matter. That was the truth of what I saw. And once my eyes were open to that, I had to make the decision of, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I went on a journey of my own. This is maybe the beginning origins of my hero's journey. Went on a journey of my own of speaking to elders that had been in this place for 30, 40 years, I think 30 years. The church was about 30 years old. And when I went to each one of them, I was like, you know what I know. Why are you still here? And every single one of them said the same thing. And they're like, well, where else would I go? Like, these are all my relationships. And many of them had either built businesses around the relationships in that place, or they had a belief that they couldn't go have a worship service at any other place, that this was the best place to have it. And I looked at them, and I think I was 30 at the time, or my early 30s. And I didn't, and internally, I don't know if I said this to each of them, but I was like, I'm young enough to not have that be me. Like that I'm just stuck in a place because I don't know where else to go. But that is the common story with so many people. They're stuck in marriages, they're stuck in jobs, they're stuck, we're stuck in dating relationships, we're stuck in friendships, we're stuck in all these things because the fear of the unknown is scarier than the fear of what we do know. And often for people, and my company is called Breakbox, often what they need to break out of those boxes is suddenly for the fear of where they are to be more than the fear of of leaving and facing the unknown. And that's a bit of the work that we do in a short amount of phrase is we help people navigate in their feelings of where they are now, and which normally is covered up by ego lies or programming or a number of different things to make them feel comfortable enough to stay where they are. But something inside is itching, right? I remember for me, something inside was itching to me when it first started for me way back then when I was 29, 30, 31, whatever it was. And it just kept going. There's got to be more than this. Like there has to be more than what I'm experiencing. There's got to be more than this cycle that I'm on. And it was the same thing when I looked at my wife, and we'd been married for 17 years. And I looked at her, and she didn't, know what I knew sleep biblically and all that, or with therapy. I had just begun therapy. And I looked at her and I was like, if I told you that we're on a Ferris wheel in our relationship and we can't get off, do you know what I'm talking about? And she said, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I was like, well, then will you go to couples therapy with me? Because she kept saying, no, 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 no. And when I said that, it resonated with her because she too realized there's this cycle that we keep living and it's not fun. For 17 years, we were married. There's something off. Like there has to be more than this. And that's always the beginning stage of when somebody's ready to make a transition. And guaranteed, we can make transitions on our own and we can go through big things, and people do. So I'm not saying it's impossible. But for me, when I'm in a world like corporate America, or when I'm in a world like that religious organization that I was in, where do I go to talk to someone to process these out that's safe? Like who do I communicate with? Who has no other agenda, right? Who doesn't have an agenda of keeping me here? Who doesn't have an agenda that if I tell them and I'm vulnerable, that they're going to use it against me and step on me to climb the corporate ladder that they're going to climb, right? And that's probably the biggest thing that most people don't have. And even, right, you have your friends and your family, even they have agendas though, right? And then here's the other thing, unless you're with a trained coach or therapist, and even then it's a problem called transference, which was a whole nother conversation we could get into. The challenge is no one can give you advice that is for you because everyone that's going to give you advice is actually filtering that through their own brain, their own experiences. And so when they're giving you advice, what they're really doing is telling you, here's what I do if I was you with the experiences that I have. So they're not giving you good advice. But what a good coach or a good therapist does is they don't give you advice because you don't need advice. What you need is a guide to how to dive inside of you and hear your own voice. And generally, that voice is buried by programs and traumas and a number of different things, fears and emotions that we're unwilling or unable or don't know how or scared of engaging. And these scary things that we're scared of engaging are the very thing that will lead us to our freedom. Like the thing that is the darkest, that is the thing that if you go into it, will give you the most freedom. And we need guides for that. We need someone to throw a flashlight on us. We need someone to say, you're not crazy. Let's keep going. To encourage you to be like, I've been there. Like, I know this feeling you're feeling is wretched and horrible and horrifying, but let's hold on to it just for a minute in this session. Like, let me show you how if you hold on to this, that it's going to speak to you. But if you push it away and if you suppress it, you're just going to stay on the loop. And it sounds hard work, right? It sounds scary, but it also is fun. That's where the creativity part comes in. I think you know that, Pauline. You love.
Absolutely. It's exact all of that what you've said is what I've experienced myself, what I experienced with my clients and dealing with transitions like that. It's been said that you can only do something when the threshold is reached, when the pain becomes so great that there is no way of staying back. And oftentimes people can actually reach that threshold and they can dissociate from that from all with all kinds of ways, and then that moment passes and they go back into that same cycle of that Ferris wheel. It's very easy to actually miss that opening. It is very short opening when the pain is so great and the threshold is there and the door is open. If the person is not ready, they will just skip it over.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it been popular recently is what is called spiritual bypassing, or one of those terms when you overload yourself with information and you think you're doing all this great stuff, and meanwhile you're ignoring the pain underneath it. And when that part is being ignored, the
Yeah.
change does not actually takes place. And that is what we need elders for. The
Yeah.
people don't really have space to sit with elders and be in that pain for a sufficient amount of time for change to take place.
Yeah.
So we need people like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we absolutely need people with that. It makes me think a little bit of I work with a lot of high performance people. One of my clients won an Emmy last year for what they do. I've worked with professional athletes going through different things and CEOs for sure. And um people that have reached a place, and it's not just those people, but my experience has been with those clients, they're already, I call it edging, and I know that's a sexual term, but that's what makes it fun. um they live a life that's edging on the tip of their fear all the time, and that's what it takes to grow, is to be able to move to that place where you're just going to live at the tip of that fear. And so the interesting thing with many of these clients is it's a little bit backwards than it would be with the other clients. So for some clients, it's about like getting them to dive in. It's the same but different. Let me explain it this way. Getting them to dive into a place that they're avoiding. But a lot of the high performance people, they're already living in fear and they just find a way to move through it, right? Like I know as a public speaker that the most terrifying thing for most people, people fear public speaking more than they fear death. And I know why, because the moments before are the most wretched moments of fear and self-criticism and judgment. And then the moments after are great, but also self-criticism and judgment and like all the things. It's horrific. But every single time I push through that fear, get on stage, something miraculous happens. Something wonderful happens. I feel like I channeled some kind of energy that needed to be channeled to speak to the people that I'm speaking to in that exact moment. And a high performance person obviously already knows that. So often, if they're making already millions of dollars and they're already doing a lot of things that have already made them successful, why do they need coaching? Like, why do they need help? And that's where you get down to they realize they need help to start understanding how to make better decisions. Maybe they start realizing they're hurting a lot of people and they're like pushing a lot of people away, or they started to realize. I have one client who's a high level manager at a large tech company. If I said it, we'd all know it. And then she was given a director position at one of the largest media conglomerates in the world. This is the tip of her dream. She's reached the dream and she's finally there. And when she looked at me, I go, "You have a therapist. Why are you hiring me?" And she said, "My therapist champions me, but every time since I've known you, you challenge me." I'm like, "Great. Well, what are the goals? What are we doing here?" And she's like, "I've reached the peak of where I want to reach. I'm making the money I want to make. I'm doing everything I want to do. And I can't stop being this boss ass bitch that's climbing ladders." She's like, "I just want to be content. Like, I want to understand what contentment feels like and what that looks like so that I can stop being this person that's living in fear, trying to climb this ladder. I'm here. Like, this is it. This is the point. I'm having a child. I don't need to go any higher. I don't want to go any higher, but something keeps making me do that." And so it's different for everybody, right? But that's a different thing where you can take them in a different space. And with a client the other day, it was wonderful. Took him to a different space where I got to him something he was very confident about and absolutely sure of that this is what he wanted in his life. And I took him to a mental space energetically and through meditation and talking him through it, of a space of like, if you have that, let's go there. Like, let's imagine what it's like. And he's like, "Okay, this isn't so bad, you know?" And I'm like, "Okay, get a little closer." That's not okay. I'm starting to feel something. What? You don't feel anything. You're feeling something? Okay, now get it closer. And he's like, "Shit." He's like, and then we pulled him back and pulled him back and got him back into his body and we talked through it. And he's like, "I've never experienced fear like that in my entire life. I just realized I can't have it all. Like, I have to make a decision of, do I want this of my life or do I want that?" And I've been a cocky, arrogant asshole for years, assuming that I can just have it all. And many people would look at that and be like, "Oh, you just destroyed his dream." No, I gave him an opportunity to be happier and to realize, if you do this, you could wreck your marriage. Is that what you want? If you take this risk and you do this thing that you say you want, is that what you really want? And your soul already knows, right? Your insides already know. Your parts know. Your ego knows. Your inner child knows. They know what you really want. But in order to hear them, we have to get in touch with them. And we do that through emotions and feelings and things that are being pointed out. Sorry, I just went on a babble rant there, but I hope it was interesting or helpful.
No, it's amazing. And what you just described is something that a lot of peak performers go through. And I deal with the same kind of clients. The approach here is that a lot of people are stuck on that hamster wheel, on that track of achievement, seeking the fulfillment, because they're thinking if they're just reaching that next goal, that's when they're going to be the pearly gates and the fulfillment and satisfaction. They get there and they realize, well, this is all there is. Okay, next goal. We're going to try it again. We're going to do it over and we're going to chase that thing. And when you Either catch it, you realize it's nothing, or you can't even catch it.
Right.
So a lot of people are in that mode. And the way that I look at it and the way that I work with that is the difference between the masculine and feminine approach. Masculine always wants to drive forward, win, it's competitive, it's always striving and
Yep.
driving and chasing, and nothing satisfactory ever comes out of it. It's only
Yep.
good to a point. The next level is the feminine approach, which is the creativity, which is the artistic expression, which is the authenticity that can only come out when all the blocks are removed. And that is a huge challenge for a lot of people because you have to be facing the unknown. And that is the scariest thing because feminine energy is the great unknown. It is the great potentiality. It's the chaos of creation. It's everything and nothing at the same time. And to face that and to live in conjunction with that, in connection with that, it is the most uncomfortable thing for a lot of people.
Mm.
So that requires a whole different level of trust in the universe and the self and whatever, that the guidance will be there and the road will appear. So I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that when we reach certain levels of consciousness, so certain tools stop working for you. Can you bring up a couple of examples of what kind of tools stopped working for you when you elevated to the next stage?
There's a couple actually. I'll just use personal examples for me. When I first kind of began the journey of my therapy journey and then kind of learning how to break through my own boxes and heal the things that were coming up in therapy, meditation practice and breath work became a very important part of that journey for me. And I combined the two, right? If you understand, or you can look up, parasympathetic uh, nervous system breathing and triggering the vagus nerve and getting yourself to calm down and out of fight or flight in that breath mode. It's something that I did really early on. I still do. It's like the foundation of everything for me. And then I went into meditation with that same breath work. And that was just how I meditated for years. Like I would just go in, I would do the breath work to calm my nervous system, and I would sit in meditation. And when thoughts would come up, instead of pushing them away or resisting them, I would just focus on the breath and go back to focusing on the breath, maybe counting the breath or doing whatever. Because the point at that moment was really to create spaciousness so my mind had freedom, and it created a discipline for me of how to transition thoughts out of my head or stop the thoughts from coming, um, and get back into myself, right? And then I hit a point where it wasn't working anymore. Like no matter what I did, the thoughts just kept coming, whether it was stress or whether it was anxiety or whether it was whatever. I don't really know. I can't really say. I don't think I have a pinpoint example of what that was. But then somehow or another, I learned and started feeling what was going on in my body. I started a technique called scanning from the top of the head all the way down to my feet. And I would scan my body as I was breath work. And I would notice that during that scan, there'd be places in my body that were tight, or I would notice certain pains, or I would notice certain things. And as I noticed those things and became aware of those things, um, it kind of did the work again of what the last tool did with the breath work. It was like it got me in my body, it got my attention back out of my mind from spinning and into my body. And then that stopped working. And I went back in again and I had to find another solution. And then I continued with the scanning, and I noticed that as I would focus more on the scanning, I started feeling certain parts of my body in particular that felt energetic or felt something, right? The crown of my head, my forehead, my throat, my chest, my solar plexus, all the way down. Those are known as chakras, and everybody knows that. I didn't know that. Like when I was doing it, I just noticed I'm feeling certain zones in certain places, and I'm feeling certain things, and then that started to help me and move me forward. And then as that developed, that kind of developed everything else and developed a sensitivity in my body to be able to notice where in my body is this? Is there a chakra? And then that went from that to understanding and moving, flowing that energy and moving it around and being able to dissipate it if needed, and then getting curious about it if I couldn't. And then that led to a whole nother thing. And I could just keep going on and on and on and on. And I'm talking about probably a 10-year process of where I am now. And in this last year, I ran into a place that I couldn't do that either. Anxiety hit so hard, stress hit so hard. Amazon had hired me actually for 3 years, kind of away from my own business to create a coaching program for them. And so I took that project on for 3 years. And then, as many people know, Amazon started shutting things down and laying people off. And I was a part of that. And then it was like, wow, I kind of gave up my coaching business and I'm picking that back up now. So I'm starting from scratch. And I noticed it really hit when my Amazon employment ran out. And I hit a place where I was like, I couldn't meditate anymore. All of my basic needs were not being met. And I was also facing a major health scare in my lungs that they couldn't figure out what was causing it. And I couldn't breathe. And if you can't breathe, then you can't meditate. Right. So everything went wrong at once. And I was in a new relationship and that was going well. But I started to get anxious in that relationship all the time. So I couldn't even hold my own, which I've always been really good of holding my own emotions, knowing what my thoughts are, not projecting on other people. And I stopped being able to do that. It was like everything I knew began to crumble around me, and everything that had worked didn't. And I would say, even in the last couple of months, it's probably been since December where I had a major emotional event. Some would call it a nervous breakdown. I think it probably was a nervous breakdown through my therapist and coaches. They're like, it was a big load of burnout or nervous breakdown or something. And that pain of that caused me to reach another level in what was going on inside me and getting curious about what's going on inside me, that then created even new tools. And I'm still developing those and figuring those out. And I don't want to talk about them publicly at this point, but it's similar to, now I can meditate again. I'm able to breathe again. I'm able to focus that energy again. And this is all in the last month, and then another crisis hit like right after that. My partner and I broke up. And then that was like, well, shit, like everything is crumbling. But at the same time, all of a sudden my consciousness moved to a place to where I wasn't worried about the money. All of a sudden I was like, I'm grieving and I'm going through these emotions of my partner and I breaking up. But I can see a bigger picture of, I understand why this is and what it is. And it's the switch of being involved in the river of your emotions and everything that's going on and becoming an observer of it. And I always was that observer. At every level, I became an observer of it. But I would always something would break and I'd have to start over and then move back to observer. And this time it was like an incredible shift of like, this is what observer is, at least for now. In 10 years from now or 5 years from now or tomorrow, it could change as I grow and as I navigate. Um, and so then I develop new tools and we go through that process again. I'm sure it'll happen again. I'm sure it does. But to some extent, if we want to get weird about it, spiritually speaking, I had a dark Kundalini awakening. Like, if we want to get through that, like, that's what it was. I've never experienced that before. I've never felt that energy go up my spine and into the back of my head, and all of a sudden have a direct access to me feeling authentic and the ego being broken away from me or separated enough from me in that manner that I felt authentically myself or had more moments that I was feeling in my authentic self. I just went for it. We just went weird. Um,
I love it.
but that all that pain and suffering that I was going through, I now realize, for me in this next learning phase, we've heard people talk about, surrender before. We've heard people talk about letting go. I haven't talked about that. I talked to my clients about it. We worked on it. I did it. We all understood it. This time it meant nothing. And a new awareness for me understood what that meant for me. And for me, surrendering and letting go now isn't just like letting something go and then like forgetting about it or not letting it bother you, right? For me, it was realizing, because my nervous system was such a wreck, that my desire for being in a different place and growing the business and being, the person that I knew I was supposed to be was pushing so hard on my body that my nervous system just said, fuck you. And it brought me back down to a place where I had to realize, oh, surrendering here is me choosing to give authority to my body as the speed at which I grow. Instead of filling myself with more books and more healing and more psychology and more therapy and more stuff. Eventually we reach a place where like you need to stop healing and start living and thriving, right? And I think that's been a big thing a lot of people haven't gone through yet is there's been this huge narrative about healing, heal, 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 and healing's going to be forever. Sure, there's going to be parts and aspects of healing forever, but you have to get to a point where you stop healing and start thriving.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, it's got to change. And I realized for myself a big way of that was I just kept going, going, going and pushing myself until my body said stop. And now I'm re-navigating the relationship of the chakras, the energy, my soul, my authentic self, all those things in a new relationship with my body and letting my body run the show instead of me pushing it. So when I start pushing it and feeling that anxiety and it's coming from me, that's a sign to go, I need to slow down. Like maybe take today off from reading a book. Maybe, go to your therapy appointment today and go out to nature for a while. Maybe stop on the business for a while, but I need clients, I need money, I need this. Maybe just trust that this is your journey and let go and realize that if you keep going and building, just do one thing every day. You can't do everything all at once. The new podcast I'm thinking about creating is going to be called Everything All at Once.
There's a movie like that too.
Yeah, yeah, there is. I probably can't use that name, but who knows? But it's like I'm thinking about calling it Everything All at Once because we're not realizing, but the truth of the reality is I don't have children, right? I don't have a family. I'm single now. And doing the work that I do and how much time and energy it consumes in my life, I can't even imagine running a family and a household right now and children and still being able to grow and grow the way that you desire and want to. I know it's possible, but a lot of people will put their lives on hold for their children. And I think that's the right move, right? But your inner growth doesn't have to be on hold. You taking time and self-care and learning to love yourself, that's the real work anyway. Um, so yeah, I know we'll see about the podcast, but that's a long-winded answer of like, here's my journey for years of like calming my nervous system, growing my inner strength, and it breaking and not working anymore over and over and over again.
Yeah, and that is a very, very profound journey to kind of go through. But also, what you've described is something really, really important because I don't know if anybody or everybody realizes that we go through these stages of getting acquainted with this system that we inhabit, which is we have three centers, which is the mind center, the heart center, and the body center. Those three centers are supposed to be aligned and working together. But most of the time, we just live in the mind. We live in the brain. That's where the thoughts are. The meditations help us notice the thoughts. But as you said, at some point, you have to start moving down the chain,
Yeah.
down the line, and getting acquainted with the body. Because just like the Matrix says, the body cannot live without the mind. They're all important, but the body carries the information for this three-dimensional reality.
Yeah.
So it is extremely important to understand that the progression is to first start with the mind, get acquainted, get used to it, start letting it run your show and and be in control of it, but then move down into the other parts, the body, feeling the sensations, feeling the emotions inside, because a lot of illnesses actually result from energies being stuck in the body, and people just treat it as a symptom, as a surface at the surface level. And so that is something to really watch out for on this evolutionary stage. And another thing that I don't know if people realize or not, there is no arrival. There's constant evolution,
Right.
expansion. There's constantly new
Yeah.
things that are difficult that come out, new level, new devil.
Yep.
There's never going to be, oh, I'm enlightened and everything is great.
Yeah.
It's like they say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
The difficulties will continue no matter. It's like we kind of been deceived with this Matrix movie because there they awaken from Matrix and everything is great.
Yeah.
But in actual, this reality doesn't work like that. You awaken and you stay in the Matrix. You
Yeah.
just have to work with it
I mean, even
better.
the movie, they awaken and then they have to fight a war,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So it's like, yeah. And it is, I think I think what you said is right on. It's the mind, the soul or the heart and the body working together. That is the ultimate love relationship. And I'm learn for myself over the last year that the mind is always going to be critical. And the mind is always the ego, or the mind is always going to be in a defense posture. It's always going to create stories. It's always going to tell you lies. And the heart is always going to be there. And really its job is to create love and a space for unconditional love in our own being that doesn't need anything outside of it to give it anything else that it doesn't already have, because everything you already have, and realizing everything you already have is already there. And then your body is this vessel that carries the whole thing. I hate calling it the meat suit, but it's the meat suit that's carrying this process and is really the pace of the process and sets the pace of the process. And when I think this is even new thought of me today, is that the ultimate divine partnership is really between the mind and the heart. That when the heart feels lonely, it's because it doesn't have a great relationship with the mind. And when the mind feels toxic, it's because it doesn't have a great relationship with the heart. And
That's
we
what they call
live,
mind and heart coherence.
yeah, exactly. We have this crazy toxic relationship with ourselves that just creates this inner turmoil that ends up projecting on the outside of us. And if we fight the mind, which is what we want to do because we want it to shut the hell up, we just create more problems. We're having a toxic relationship with that. And of course, it's going to respond the way it responds. And it's going to drive us nuts. And it's going to always be on guard because we're always attacking it. And many of us, like myself, who grew up in a family of self-help people, that literally my father was a coach and consultant. I didn't get into this business because of that. We don't even speak, but he was always pumping me full of affirmations and positivity and like all this stuff. And what I realized even about all that stuff doesn't work unless love is the motivator, right? Excuse the phrasing, but I'll get passionate about it. Affirmations don't do dick
That's
unless
right.
unless the energy behind them is literally coming from your authentic self, that is love. Then these affirmations or affirmative reminders, when they read them, create an emotion inside of you. That's what's powerful. And that's what makes them powerful. But just reciting words to yourself is just giving you like a religion to follow the rules that you're hoping something's going to change, and nothing changes. Because if there's not the mind heart connection in your affirmations, then you're not going to feel them. And if you can't feel them, you can't move into them, because that's the big
Exactly.
thing. So there's this, it's as squishy as it sounds and as unscientific as it sounds. Like love is the ultimate power of the universe. And it has to operate on a level, a cellular level within ourselves. Um, and that's really what sets us free. And that's where coaching comes into play, right? Like I just got off the call with my business coach, who's new, and I'm working on a book and I'm doing all this stuff. And I read him like the introduction of the book. He's like, "You are an incredible writer." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know. Like people have told me that my whole life, but I haven't written the book yet." And then he's like, "And your voice needs to be broadcasted. It is soothing. It is like all these things. This is all shit I knew." Like when I had the podcast before, people would say, "I don't care really about the podcast, but I listen just to hear your voice because it's soothing and helpful and whatever."
Yeah, you could just read some stories in the
Yeah.
podcast. That would be just
Doesn't
good.
matter. Yeah, thanks. I just need to put it out there. Yeah, and it's just like that is the power of like having somebody in your court that reminds you of like these are the things you're good at. Like these are the things you know. And then here's the connection on like how to move that forward. And here's the blocks that you've noticed that you've seen. And here's how we can navigate like helping you to integrate those into your being with love so that they're no longer a hindrance to you moving forward. And it's
Yeah.
just such a, I know and this is the weird thing. There's a million people out there being coaches. It's like everybody that loses their job at a major place is becoming a coach. It's not right or wrong. It just is. And I think the reason that is because people are, for lack of a better term, I don't necessarily like the term, but are awakening to there's something more.
Exactly.
And you want to share it when you have a little piece of that awakening, right? We all think that like, this is it. I've reached it. I have something to give to people, which is bullshit. You never reach it. But we get excited about that and we want to broadcast that to somebody and let them also have the same awakening that we do, which is a good chain to keep going.
Well, it's also, I think we are limited in words. People discover some kind of part of themselves that feels authentic and fully expressed, and they call it coaching because it's the closest term that really comes to that expression. We just need more terms for that. We need to
Yeah, it's
come
good.
up with better words, more variety of words for what it is, so that coaching itself does not become this term that is being distorted because of all of that overwhelming abundance of different things.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, and there's huge awakening happening right now, I believe, if we want to go weird or not too weird, but there's a lot of healers coming online, sort of to speak, because there's a shift in consciousness, major shift in consciousness happening. Wherever you believe it or not, likely if you're listening to this podcast, something brought you here and you are somehow on that wavelength of being able to perceive and hear that. So there's a lot of work to be done right now. The world is changing, humanity is changing, and those of us who can see it, we are charged with this work of
Yeah.
continuing on. And so it is what it is. It's not easy, but I guess it's better than nothing.
Yeah. And it's interesting. This thought came up too, is like we all think that what we have inside us needs to be monetized. That's literally the ego. And the ego running on a program of lack that we were built to have from capitalism or other programs. What if we can live our lives and go through these evolution processes and it's not about money? I mean, that's a scary proposition. I'm sitting here being somebody who is making a living doing this thing, um, and trying to make a living and like doing different things to do it. But that's part of it too. Like I think that's part of the surrender,
That
it's
is very complex situation we have right now. Three-dimensional reality demands of us to pay the bills, to be functional, to make money, to kind of somehow maintain this flow and the currency and the current of energy. And yet at the same time, we are awakening to a greater aspects of ourselves that are not really contained by
yeah,
the same system. That is a very interesting intersection where we find ourselves in. And what will come out of it, who knows? But authentic creativity
yeah,
is the currency in itself. So somehow, maybe we'll find a different way, different system of how to deal with that.
yeah. I
Because all
mean,
the systems that we have right now are outdated.
yeah, totally. And hopefully, and this is what I like. It goes back to the high performers. High performers want to make the shift before they have to, right? Like that's something they notice. They see things coming ahead and they're like, I need to make a shift before this change gets here. And I think that's a level of consciousness I hope that we all have so that we're not reliant on something bad happening before we're ready to make a shift in our health. And before the lung cancer diagnosis, we stop smoking. Before our heart breaks down, we change our diet, we start exercising. And I know it's possible. I mean, it is for everybody, but it's like that's really, I think, when you really reach a level of conscious. I think it was Wayne Dyer that said the first way we learn is pain and suffering, right? And so we make changes based on pain and suffering. And then the next level of that, I don't even remember what he said, so I'm going to misquote it. But the next level of that is all of a sudden you start to become aware in that you don't need pain and suffering because you've had the pain and suffering and now you're comfortable and realizing things are going to come and things are going to go. And if I ride that roller coaster, it's going to be exhausting. And then the third phase of that is we can see it coming before it gets here. So for instance, we can feel the energy in our body that we're frustrated about something about work. And before I get home to project that on my wife, I'm going to sit with that and deal with that so that when I get home, I know that that energy won't be there. Right. And that's the ultimate, right? Is like doing something about it before it happens. And all it takes is just a little shift. And I think, well, we're all going to get there. And this is the thing. This is huge, right? This is very, very profound. We are all used to this idea of doing the work, but surrender is actually the idea that you don't have to do anything. Like it's literally coming to you. Like it will happen. This evolution will happen. And there used to be a phrase out there that people would say, change or die. All that did was talk to the old narrative and the old story, which builds into the ego and a capitalism that you have to do a bunch of shit to get somewhere. Now, I'm not saying you don't. There are parts of that. But if that's what we're living in, then we're going to be stuck in this narrative of work, 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 heal, 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 heal. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And all that is a program that we were taught in school. Have I done enough homework to get the grade? Instead of the ultimate thing of love, which is this surrender of, and I don't even know how to verbalize it yet, but I can feel it in my chest. I can feel it, this place of like living a life where I'm just surrendered to what is and able to navigate those aspects of up and downs of life as an observer and view all of this as helping me. I think if we take the big picture out and we look at every aspect of our life, at first, kidney failure hit me and I knew it was coming, really, because I'd had symptoms for years, but my family believed in a divine healing that was egoic. And so I ended up, they never took me to the doctor as a child, and I ended up getting kidney failure at 29. And then when they came into my room and part started putting healing scriptures all over the wall, I literally, this is amazing that I'm remembering this right now. I told them, I was like, take that shit down. And I was a pastor, right? So I did swear. I've always been the same person, but it wasn't used to it. It wasn't normal for them to hear me react that way. And I was like, take that shit down. I'm done. Like you've had me read scriptures my entire life and I'm here. Like you've told me if I read those my entire life that I wouldn't be here. So it's bullshit. Take it down. And they took it down and they were nervous about it. And they're like, well, what are you doing? And in that time, I was like deep into reading the Bible. And there's a scripture in Corinthians where Paul the apostle is praying to God to like get his eyesight back or be healed or something like that. And it's this whole kind of conversational argument with God of like, take this from me, but if you don't, I will still take this from me, but if you don't, right? Which is what we do. We want to get rid of it. But if we don't, we know we need to navigate ahead, right? I want my partner back, but I know if I don't, that I'm going to have to keep going. And instead of just being like, whether I get my partner back or not, or whether I get this healing or not, nothing matters. I'm still here. And
Yeah.
there's this pull above it. It's almost like, a drone helicopter moment where we're just above those things and we're able to see them of like, I have money, I don't have money. My health is great, my health is not great. And either way, if I look back at my entire life, and I'm only 46 years old, which sounds old to some people, but I'm telling you, I'm only 46 years old. If I look back at every single one of those things that I hated that happened in my life, every single one of them moved me to a level up in my life. Before I was even aware of consciousness, it moved me to a better place in life.
Yeah.
The challenge is we either have a difficulty with new things or we have a difficulty with things dying or both. And the place of coming to this safety of whether it's coming and it's here and we can celebrate it and experience. This was the biggest problem for me over the last year. My life was brand new. Everything was brand new. And I couldn't experience how great that newness was because I was already so afraid of losing it, afraid of the business failing, afraid of the relationship failing, afraid of, all this stuff that I felt like, holy shit, I'm here. Like I've been, for lack of a better term, manifesting or dreaming of this space right here, right now for years. What if it goes away? And then I lived in that conflict until my nervous system shut down. And then you realize you come out of that and your ego goes, you knew better. You should have done better. Look at how you messed up. Or you can go, no, I played the exact role I needed to play that the universe had me play in that moment. And even though I might have known better, I was authentic to myself in my pain in that moment.
Yeah.
And that pain has led me to this now, a huge feeling of awakening and freedom and pulling away and pulling above from the very difficult things that I thought were so difficult and are really difficult. But I'm up above them now and I'm observing them now that I can now make decisions and be freer to just experience life and love and happiness, you know, in a new way. And that's a consciousness bump. And had I not gone through what I went through and quote unquote, what the ego says is you made mistakes, which in reality, yeah, there are things I should apologize for, sure. But the higher truth is you can't fuck it up. You're on the
Yeah.
journey regardless. And every single time I played the character, the authentic role that I had in the moment, whether it was a good role or a bad role, I came out of that changed. And that's the great thing to be grateful for. I just keep playing the role I'm supposed to
Exactly.
play. Yeah.
And actually, what you just described is inability to hold the expansion. And people will experience in different ways, but essentially, when you're calling something in and it shows up, if your container is not strong enough from working out through life to maintain the strength of that container, you will spill it out. It is
Yeah.
kind of, it's the thing that happens. We get this expansion that we wanted, and then we're unable to hold it
Right.
because we're still not developed enough in our consciousness to have this container be strong enough to hold everything that we asked for. So we go through another cycle of learning and growing and getting better, and then we'll be presented again with that expansion, and maybe next time we can hold it, but there's constant evolution of the ability to hold things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's scary too, right? So that puts this weight on us then. Well, why couldn't I get the, and again, that's the ego story. Why couldn't I get the container ready? Because you didn't know. That's why. You had no idea. And that's where you can get back into love and kindness and compassion for yourself, which is going to elevate you to the level you need to be. You didn't know. It's okay. You had no idea. You didn't know. And if you
We don't
don't
know what
know,
we don't know.
then you couldn't do anything about it. So you played the authentic role that you needed to play to learn this lesson. And now you can keep moving forward.
Exactly. So this was such an amazing value, just absolutely packed episode. I'm so grateful for you as a being guest here because this was amazing.
Thank you.
I hope everybody listens and then rewinds back and listens to all of that again because there's tremendous value in everything. Like people can just listen to that podcast alone and not have to read anything ever again. Everything is inside you, and all you have to do is be patient with yourself and love yourself and being compassionate. And it is a journey, and we are all actors in our own movies. So patience with the self is the key. And so, if people wanted to find out more about what you do, where can they do that?
Yeah, my website is breakboxcoaching.com. You can see more about what I do there, schedule a free complimentary assessment session with me. And then also my Instagram, TikTok is Boxbreaker Life at Boxbreaker Life. And feel free to follow me on either of those. I don't get to TikTok as much as I want, but I'm on Instagram pretty regularly. So send me a message or write me a note or send me an email, ZACG at breakboxcoaching.com. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you. Amazing. I will put the links in the description. And thank you, Zach. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching this. And we will see you next time.